Imagine this. It's the early 1500s. During that era, the modern flushing toilet as well as the wheel lock musket were both invented. Two things that would revolutionize not only how we take a crap, but also the crap we are able to kill. And a guy comes through town. Now just put yourself back in Europe, back in those days, around 1510, 1515. You're living in a small village somewhere, and a guy comes through town, and he's got this amazing new invention. A wheel-lock musket that can be shot by one individual. The townspeople inspect it, they marvel at it, they think this would be wonderful for hunting. Another guy comes through town, and he's got these flushing toilet ideas. He can set up a sewer system and allow you not to throw your poop out in the street like we used to. Now, the townspeople naturally look at these things and they say, these are wonderful, but we can't afford this. One guy in town, he's investigating these, he's checking them out closely, and as the people leave town, he talks with the townsfolk and says, let's make our own. So, over the next 10 years, they gradually are able to, and this is all hypothetical, all right? It's just making it up as I go, so don't get too technical on me here. They invent their own crappers. They figure out their own sewer system, say it's a great idea. They have flushing toilets, and then they also end up being able to use the metals they have to build this new amazing thing, this musket. A few years later, those same guys come back through town again, trying to sell their wares. And they say, the townspeople have all these things already? How did you get them? They say, we made our own. And so these two inventors come and they hand the townspeople a piece of paper that says, we're going to sue your town for everything you have because you're using our idea. Now, this is exactly what intellectual property is today. And exactly what happens to people who try to invent something that someone else has, quote, already invented. The reason why I use these two examples is because the townspeople could come up and say, actually, you didn't invent these. These were invented far before now. You're just the one who discovered them again thousands of years ago. You know, the Chinese had developed musket-like devices. Maybe you weren't the first to invent it. The point being that there's a term called on the shoulders of giants. It means that a lot of the things out there are created on the backs of others who have made these amazing inventions, discoveries, people who have accumulated this knowledge over time. And now, this knowledge over the past 100 years has been hoarded and only dominated by a few. I could go into patent protection, how Disney has changed the whole landscape of copyright by getting extensions on Mickey Mouse. It was Disney specifically that lobbied Congress to extend the Mickey Mouse, even though it's been over 100 years. It got to such an absurd level that there was so much money being thrown into the government through lobbying that basically these companies can invent something and prevent anyone else from inventing it. And it takes a lot of the innovation out of society. And one idea might be, well, it protects these companies. Well, here's the thing. If your product's better than another product, then it will sell. People will buy it. But there's no longer the need to prove the quality of your merchandise or your inventions. All you have to do is just say, well, the other person has to get, just sue them out of existence, make sure there is no competition, and they're forced to buy your product. This is what goes on with the complete market of garbage out there. Everything we buy, from electronics to, iPhones, and their failure to allow people the right to repair. There are so many things that Apple has done to prevent people from innovating on their products. Blocks from people if you have a third, party service try to repair your phone, they're not allowed to get the parts. A side note, within the last month, Apple has claimed that they're going to allow right to repair, but it's just answering and catering to the right to repair community. This is an important factor in this too. The idea that you're forced to buy something not through limited companies, but then you're not allowed to even repair it yourself or have someone else that repair it that is totally qualified. Then on top of that, a lot of people have had issues taking it to the authorized repair centers where people steal their data, get into their info on their phones and stuff. No one's safe from problems, but I have a kind of radical theory, go figure, to completely abandon intellectual property, patent protection, and copyright, because I feel it's doing more harm right now than it ever is doing any benefit to the average person. It is benefiting a few companies. It is benefiting a few creators and a few inventors. But my belief is, if you get right down to it, people will just become more creative in protecting their secrecy around what they're inventing and making in the meantime. Here's the thing. The argument against my theory here would be to say, well, if you don't have any protection, then large companies can just steal from the small creators. They already do. Amazon allows companies on their platform to sell their new merchandise and their creations. And then Amazon will reverse engineer, build their own version of it, and then they will compete and put their ads for their product over the other person's. Even if you're searching for that item, you'll come up with Amazon. They have really ruined it. And it's basically like a privatizing of information, of knowledge. If you think about things like the JSTOR, if you're not familiar, or not JSTOR, I think it is JSTOR. It's a place where they keep all the scientific articles. And a lot of these articles, by the way, a vast amount of them, are paid for by your taxes. Like, you go to work, you pay a percentage of your money for the work you do, you pay your taxes when you're out at the gas pump, everywhere. These taxes supposedly go to fund some of these science projects to benefit humanity. Then the information from this is locked up in a file that you can only access if you're willing to pay hundreds, if not thousands of dollars to access these files, and the average person won't. And no, you're not allowed to get them and download them and share them with the world. In fact, I don't recall the guy's name, but a few years back, there's a well-known hacker that actually had set up in, I think, Harvard, and he was copying many of the files that he wanted to share with the world, and they sued him so bad. I mean, he ended up killing himself over it because he was facing so much prison time, and he's gone down as a legend now because all he was trying to do is just share knowledge. Think about how many people have either died or lost their businesses, have been sued out of existence by huge multinational corporations that do not put up with the small guy. I don't believe in protection because it only protects those who are already able to protect themselves. Companies that are big enough to make the profit margin work, whereas the small guy is just struggling for years to get their business afloat. I'd love to hear anybody's opinion to the contrary. I mean, it's the same way it is with, for example, publicly funded, the money that was given to the pharmaceutical companies to develop various drugs. And they don't share those recipes with the countries that probably need them the most because it's about greed. It's always been about greed. And instead of profits being used to better the company or help the employees, they are used for stock buybacks or buying separate stocks in order to not have to pay taxes. I mean, companies like Amazon didn't even pay taxes, and they're complete thieves of intellectual property, and they didn't pay any taxes a few years ago at all because they spent so much money in buybacks and investment in stocks that Bezos himself didn't have to pay a damn thing. So it's a weird time to be alive, and it seems that greed kind of rules all, and therefore a lot of people lose hope. And I just want to make it clear that ain't the case. There's only a few people out there who are like that. They're going to be the ones you hear about. They're going to be the ones who spend their whole lives trying to, get ahead by taking other people's. And I haven't even got into property theft from the small guy, even remotely. But I do want to note that patent trolls are a whole other breed. Companies are allowed to buy a patent from somebody, say, who wants to invent something and it's too complicated. People will buy the patent, or they'll just file a patent on something that doesn't exist yet, and then they'll just hold it and wait for a company to develop that product. They won't tell the company, oh, by the way, don't make this. They will wait until the product is made and on the market for several months. Then they will sue the manufacturer and settle out for millions for a product they never even really invented that was probably already invented. And a good example would be the email. There was a company that bought basically their patent was a electronic communication device of sending information or mail from one computer to another computer. It was that vague. And they were able to sue the first email providers. I don't even recall how the story went, but there was nothing they could do. And so, anyway, there's a lot of that going on out there. It doesn't necessarily affect me, not being an inventor, not being a guy who made a toilet or invented anything for that matter. But it does keep people like us from saying, maybe we could just create a product of our own that's similar to a product we see and make it better. You want to call it cultural appropriation. You could call this like, invention appropriation. But the whole point is it's better for all people if we can all improve on each other's ideas. That's what we've lost. There are people preventing us from sharing ideas because it is the law. And that's sad. That's really sad. We need all hands on deck, And the tech companies are some of the worst. I mean, the things that they do to each other, at least have through the .com and the tech era, it's gross, but it's what happens when you put money into people's hands. They seem to kind of lose their mind. But any rate, those are my thoughts on it. Yeah, I'd like to see at least things adjusted to where people can start inventing things again and creating things that are beneficial without feeling like they're being watched and going to be sued. And that doesn't even get into the frivolous lawsuits category, which is a whole other story. But these are all small things, but they're big things, They're things that affect our society more than we realize. Because when you see how much money is going into the pockets of the billionaires, how they've increased their wealth by 30% over the last year, you should be asking questions as to exactly how and why. Anyway, talk to you next time. Take care.